Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the reunion of Anatomy of a Movie. It is not an official Anatomy of a Movie, but I have Demetri Panos here with me. I have Marisa Serafini. And if you don't know what Anatomy of a Movie is, I wouldn't blame you. We haven't been back on in a while, but we used to do a movie dissection show, not just a review show, but really deep diving into the story, the plot, of course, what worked, why some things maybe didn't. But then also we went beyond that. We talked about the box office, how it even got made, the cultural relevance, all that good stuff, really filling out all the things in regards to a movie. That's what I believe made us different. And there's a new movie that came out, Ne Zha 2, with an English dub by A24. And we figured, you know what? Let's get the band back together one last time, right? The old, the cliche of all movies. So I have Marisa Serafini and Demetri Panos. Say hi to the audience.
Hello, audience. How are you? You know, I don't like the one last time deal.
We'll save that for another time. Welcome, Marisa.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm glad that we're together, and I'm glad we're still in communication because we all saw each other last month. Not to put a timestamp on our show, but yeah, I agree, Demetri. Why last time? It sounds so definitive.
It's a tongue in cheek because, of course, the one last time then ends up with a sequel and a third and a fourth and a fifth. So listen, the one last time is air quotes, okay? So
Fair.
All good.
We're the Who of movie podcasts. One last show.
Yes. One last show
final
indeed.
tour.
So let's get into this. Just kind of a forewarning. We will be pretty much spoiling the entirety of this movie pretty quickly. So if you haven't seen the movie, I recommend that you do before you listen to us. But hey, even if you listen to us, you still might be confused in terms of so just that's your kind of forewarning. But just to set the table, I had seen Ne Zha 2 months ago with the Mandarin version, and it was subtitled and whatnot. And I reviewed it and just got a crap ton of comments very positively about the movie. And I was like, and I, at that point, it already broken $2 billion, hence why I wanted to go see it. And then I talked to you guys, and you guys were like, what the hell is Ne Zha? I've never heard of this thing. Like most Western audiences and even cinephiles, oddly enough. And then when I saw the news that they were doing an English dub with Michelle Yeoh, A24, all that stuff, I said, listen, let's utilize this opportunity, to have this reunion, but also I do think this is a cultural moment, let's say. So that's how I got you two involved. But I would be curious, let's start with you, Marisa, ladies first. What did you know about Ne Zha going into this? What did you know about Ne Zha before I even started throwing seeds at you and all that stuff?
I heard of it. I remember it playing in AMC's because, I had the A-list and just saw the list that all the movies that were playing at the time. And I just not knowing anything about it, I didn't naturally go. So I missed it. And I missed the first one when that originally came out. And then when you were just praising Ne Zha 2, and I'm like, well, of course, Phil knows what he's talking about. He's seen good movies. He knows good storyline and character development. So when you were praising it, I was like, okay, I got to go see it. And then watched it, thoroughly impressed, and we'll definitely get into it. But not knowing anything, I definitely now have an appreciation for the first one and the second one.
Right on. And Demetri, for you?
Again, when there was just an opportunity to get the band back together again one last time, right. I said yes. Why not? Have I heard of the movie? Through reading the trades, knowing how much it's made at the box office, seeing that it was this huge, more, for lack of better words, a cultural event. But I did go into it very blindly, really not knowing anything about it. And my initial thoughts are, look, it's stunning, it's beautiful. I watched this movie in IMAX 3D. it wasn't by design, to be honest with you. It was the only thing at the time that I wanted to go see it. That's all that was available, IMAX 3D, and I loved seeing it in that version. It does look spectacular. Look, trying to piece together all the storylines and such, it's kind of difficult. And I get it. This movie not made here, made in China. I understand that it's very mythological. There's some geopolitical things going on there. But the storylines were very scattershot. I'll just go with that. I just had to whittle this 2.5-hour movie down to who's the good guys, who's the bad guys. Demons aren't necessarily bad guys. Apparently, in China lore, they're demons. They have these fantastical powers, and I get it. You have blue and red. You have these orbs that represent the light and the dark to an extent, and from the last movie, they become friends, and they have to help each other out to make it through this adventure. As I said, I found the movie to be stunningly beautiful. Whenever I felt lost in the story, I just looked at the screen, to be honest. And again, I don't regret seeing this in IMAX 3D. It was flawless, the way that it looked. And, as far as the American dub, yeah, it's fine. It's good. I don't understand A24's literal involvement of this, other than if they're getting ancillary rights. Lots to talk about regarding the box office and how I compare it. I do have a couple of comparisons, both a domestic release and another foreign release. And, look, I appreciate the movie for what it is. If people aren't familiar with it, I understand why maybe our audiences overlooked it. But then again, I can understand why some of foreign audiences would overlook many of our movies. So I get that. The movie, again, it is something to behold on the big screen. I definitely, Phil and Marisa, I have to say, if this movie was recommended to me and I didn't have any other way to watch this movie, and I watched it on my TV screen, I would not have enjoyed it. I might have actually cut out, to be honest. I think the movie-going experience, the largest theatrical experience to see this movie, is really the way to go for this movie, to appreciate the visuals, and being that it is animated. And we like to think that our animation styles, whether it be Pixar, whether it be Disney, whether it be Illumination, DreamWorks for that matter, we have some great visual animators here, but this one, in comparison, kind of blows everything away that I've seen to an extent. But it was just, from an animation standpoint, I was marveled by it,
so
literally.
We'll definitely break all of that as far as the box office and the team of animators that came together. It is fascinating. You guys didn't see the first one. And there's a lot of people who haven't, and then they're like, oh, maybe if I saw the first one, I would understand the second one more. I want to tell you, nothing still prepares you for the second one. And two kind of things kind of come into play. Number one, a lot of the characters that you end up meeting in this movie, you think like you might have been introduced to in the first movie. You're not. You're just not. So you can throw that out the window as far as like thinking. Number two, and I thought, I don't know who to credit for this, but it was an astute observation of someone saying that what this is culturally for China is kind of like Greek mythology, when you're just kind of thrown in and you have to know all these characters, or you can say Marvel, or even just Christianity, right? Imagine not knowing what Christianity is and you're just being thrown crucifixes left and right. And it's like, Why are there T's everywhere? What? Why is everyone obsessed with this thing? You know, so it's interesting how they can have that shorthand and we have that disconnect, right? And that's what, and like you, I found it very, um, I just allowed the images to play the story, right? And that's what, certainly by the third act, you're so much into it. And not that I wanted to talk about two things real quick before we dive into the story from your guys' perspective. But number one, I'm thank God I got to see it with an English dub, because with all due respect to subtitles, like I don't mind reading subtitles, but you know, apparently in Mandarin you could say two words and it creates a whole paragraph. And so when you're trying to read those subtitles, I'm like, there's no way I can't keep up with this. Number one. Number two, as you guys know, and this is interesting, there's a lot of, like, you get introduced to characters and there's just graphics of who it is. And you might meet them for one scene and that's it, but they give you like their backstory via graphics while the scene's continuing. So there I am trying to read lines of dialogue as well as three graphic designs of who these characters are, and there's just no way to keep up. And I will tie this into the next thing. Not that every Chinese animated movie is exactly like this, but I am starting to see like that this is a style, not just of Ne Zha, but I saw Into the Immortal World as well, and same sort of thing. This mix of potty humor with epic scale, great animation, lots going on, and the subtitles introducing characters and stuff like that. So it seems to be a sensibility of at least Chinese animation, filmmaking, let's say.
Storytelling.
Yeah. So in terms of its devices, right? And certainly there's different directors in America have different sensibilities and art direction and style and so forth. But I guess I'm curious from your perspective, the mix of potty humor and the epic nature of this. Marisa, kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, when you go into this, yes, just because it's animated doesn't mean it's necessarily a movie for children or young adults or like any specific demographic. Yes, the main character is quote unquote 3 years old. So that kind of threw me off a bit, even though I was like, this dude is way older than 3, but okay. So like I had to disconnect from that. But you can see how they were trying to cater to multiple generations and demographics, especially with the gross eating throw up in the cauldron. And I'm like, oh gosh, you had a lot of those gag jokes and stuff, and then even some just physical slapstick humor, which can translate across many multiple types of people and types of humor. So like I could see how they try to cater to a lot of different people. I didn't mind it. I thought the gross jokes and throw up jokes lasted a little too long. Like you, Demetri, I saw it in 3D, so it was like really up in my face when they did those moments. But animation-wise, it was great. Story-wise, like for characters, yes, fortunately, I think it's because we're trained watching movies and film and reading books and all these, and to know and to be introduced to so many characters all at once, you kind of have to like quickly piece together who's related to who's connected to who's loyal to who. So it took me like a minute, but eventually I figured it out. And overall, once the story got going, I was like, okay, now I see where the motivation is. I see who's betraying who. So I found it more linearly and non-linearly to put together, maybe more easily than other people who might have just jumped into this blindly as well. But I like the testament that that's just how we study movies and characters. So for the storyline, I really appreciate it because it does show a lot of universal themes, despite the fact that it was, made in China and Chinese type of production. It's still universal. I mean, like us Americans, we understand the values of family, loyalty, and just the appreciation of what we do to make ourselves better and do things for other people.
Yeah, to me, and not that you have
to. As far as the potty humor, it just reminded me of a Minions movie. And, albeit, I can honestly say, when I watch a movie like Suzume, right, there is no potty humor in that. And it just makes me wonder, who this movie is really geared for. And, then I ask the question, am I smarter than a sixth grader? In this case, maybe not. But then again, from a cultural standpoint, they would understand things a heck of a lot more. You brought up something earlier, Phil, when you talked about the third act. And by the time you get there, yes, you do have a semblance, like you know who's bad, you know who's who, pretty much. You know who's trying to overcome, the good that's trying to overcome the bad. But before that third act, there are other people who come into the story. And, there's a character that comes in and he more or less raids and overtakes this one land. And you go, okay, this guy's not a good guy. Like, it took a while for me, anyways, watching the movie, call me stupid, whatever, like for the movie for me to suss out who really is the bad guy. Because there are people who I thought aren't good people necessarily who ended up being good people. And then it really is clearly defined who the villain is in this movie, who they have to overcome, towards at the end of the day. And again, that comes together, pretty clearly from the end of the second act going into the third, where all, look, the movie is one epic battle after another. It's 3 acts of battle, 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 and everything looks great. So did the potty humor, going back to that, did it bother me? No, I've just never seen it in a movie that is so epic. Like, I do not think we're going to get this kind of potty humor in Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. And this is as epic as a movie that The Odyssey can be like, minus the potty humor. And was it off-putting? No. But again, I just wonder who, at the end of the day, does this end up being catered to? Because obviously when you're putting in the humor like that, and again, maybe potty humor just plays very, very differently elsewheres than it does here. Usually when we have that kind of humor in a movie, it's more of a, Despicable Me, Minions kind of a movie. And which is obviously family driven and kid driven. So, I just found it's just very weird to see that kind of humor in a movie as big and epic for storytelling, because there are very serious parts in this movie too.
Yeah, I mean,
so there is death. There's people who dealing with serious death here, and it was weird, to say the least.
Yeah, no,
in the context of this story,
it made me really kind of think about I don't know. I can't speak obviously for all of China, but certainly these filmmakers just don't care. It's like we're gonna, right? Because the first time I watched it, I was like, I don't think kids. Just the fact that they have to read 8,000 subtitles and I couldn't keep up. I was like, I don't think this is for kids. If kids come to this, they're not going to have a good time. Now with the English dub, I think they can. But it is interesting because we have people puking, farting, and all that, and then you have Ne Zha towards the end ripping himself out from needles, right? Like we see that. So it's not just violence. He's literally just being like, I'm going to, no matter what happens to me, I'm going to do what I can, even if it literally means rupturing my entire body because there's 8 trillion needles in my bones and skin.
Right.
And then you have this insane epic battle that just goes on and on and on. And you end the movie with, first off, hey, do you think there might be a credit scene? Like literally the movie asks you this. And then you get a credit scene with the villain of your entire movie, and it makes him look like a putz. So, they just don't care. I just love the dichotomy of he's the big bad, but guess what? He's also an idiot, and we're going to play to that. I don't know. I just found it
Yeah.
oddly fascinating in that respect that they just don't care.
No, no, and that's fine. Like, again, I find movies like this a window into not just other cultures, learning about other mythologies and such, but just to like their filmmaking, their story, the way that they think out a story and what they decide to put in it. Obviously, it worked. It worked in the Chinese territory and many other territories as well. So, who am I to say, right? People are attuned to that apparently, and that's all well and good.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's like they don't care. They're just going to mix it in. It's what they do.
So, Marissa, I have a reading assignment for you because this is based on Chinese mythology, a 16th
Okay.
century novel, Investiture of the Gods. So, I have not read this book. I've not heard it, but apparently, just like with Greek mythology, anyone who's in China, for the most part, as I understand it, would know like this mythology, no different than like you and I, we all might not know like every story of Zeus, but we know Zeus, right? And the idea of Hercules and why we say Herculean task, right? Because he had to do all that and blah, 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 right? So it's akin to that. And they plan on making 3 movies. The first one took 5 years to make, and that was about an hour and 40 minutes, give or take. And you can watch it on Netflix. Now, the tricky part is there's a lot of Ne Zhas out there. So, make sure you're catching up on the correct Ne Zha because of, the mythology, people have iterated the story many, many times and whatnot. This one took longer and stuff like that. As I'm trying to, in my notes, break down the cost of this. The production budget.
I thought you said 80. Did I read 80? Right.
$80 million, which is pretty insane for a 2.5-hour movie that, in my estimation, has done things that, when you really look at the surface of it and you can appreciate animation, but these things have not been done before. They've done more than 2,400 shots. And this one took over 4,000 people across 138 animation companies. Like, that's insane. Like that be like Pixar working with, as you mentioned, Illumination, DreamWorks, the Disney animation side, Warner Animation, and every animation. I don't think we have 138 animation studios. Not that I can name in terms of the big ones within the U.S.
Yeah.
I got to say, you have to appreciate that because to have that many production hands on it and just shows how much love and time and art was put into this. And I think this is an example of a movie if you don't cut funding from arts. If you allow people to do their craft, you can see how gorgeous things can turn out. We saw the details of the vines on the cauldron. We saw the details of the nails piercing the hearts. Like every frame of this movie is gorgeous. You can stop at any moment and you can take a screenshot. It's a gorgeous film, and you can see where the love and affection of art and animation went into this. So good on them.
Yeah, I have to say that it reminded me, as I was thinking about it, it reminded me of another movie that the 3 of us saw. The 3 of us actually reviewed for Anatomy of a Movie. And from a cultural standpoint, I could imagine other cultures not necessarily diving into the story because we would have more familiarity with it. But the movie is Zootopia. I remember when we talked about Zootopia, and we talked about the painstaking measures that they took for that particular movie at that time, which was groundbreaking at that time. And we talked about the fur and trees. And again, from a story perspective, it was an animated version, almost a retelling of Chinatown. and the noir genre of movies, which maybe somebody overseas just might not necessarily understand what it is, doesn't make it any less enjoyable. It's a really good mystery. So I was watching this going, yeah, this for them, like, now this is 100 times from a technological standpoint, from an animation standpoint, far different. And it made me feel that from a US standpoint, we're kind of behind. Like, because I've never seen as good as movies like How to Train Your Dragon, any Pixar movie, and listen, Pixar is, broken great grounds. Movies like Coco, movies like Up, even from the first.
DreamWorks.
I'm sorry, say that again. What?
How to Train Your Dragon is DreamWorks, but yes,
yeah, yeah. So, but it's kind of, I mean, they're all great, and they've all added and made animation bigger and better, and more people go see them. But this was by far nothing I've ever seen done. And it really did, for the first time, I said, wow, I always thought we were kind of on the forefront of this stuff. And no, we're not really. We're good. I've not seen anything here that looks that good as far as a movie.
Demetri, sorry, I just have to piggyback off of that. I totally agree, because I saw this in 3D and it was right in my face. And then I had a moment. I was like, America, what are we doing? Like, do better. They're really upstaging us and showing how great cinema can be, and visually, just with the advancement of our technology even these days, and the groundbreaking things they did on this film, it's they're really setting the bar very, very high. And I think and there's no question why this movie crossed the 2 billion mark. I mean, look at it. It is by far one of the most gorgeous animated films I have ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah, I mean, there's a dark side to it that I don't listen. I'm not necessarily an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but in China, there's the 996, which means you work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. And I can only imagine the hours that it took all these animators to put all this stuff together, right? Obviously, there's a currency difference. So, if we made this movie, let's say at Pixar, I'm sure it would cost way more than $80 million. And I think that's part of a thing that we have to find the right balance between budget and also exertion, right? So listen, obviously it worked. It created a great spectacle. And, having my foot in the animation realm now more and more, obviously artists want to create good work. And I think there's a vast difference between pushing yourself and challenging yourself like an athlete would, let's say, versus having a toxic work environment. And I think part of that is also the pay structure of who gets paid versus not, because a lot of times the animators, they're the ones that don't really profit from, being essentially whipped like horses to deliver on time. But obviously they have the skills and stuff like that. And, it is fascinating too. You watch, I've heard this comparison many a times. You watch a Jurassic Park and the CG from that era looks more believable than some of the more modern advanced stuff here. And it's why, because it's not that we're not capable. It's, we don't give it the right time. Everything's content. I use that word deliberately because we create a derogatory sense of what film and television and other forms of art are. It's just content, meaning just dump it, whatever. And yeah, so it's a negative disservice. And yeah, I do think there's that side where if we just think that we're too high and mighty, and that's another reason why I really wanted for us to watch this movie. And yes, we'll break down the box office numbers not being so great for the American version, but I think again we just have this bubble where even oftentimes we look at the U.S. domestic gross, and it's you have to look at the worldwide box office, both for our movies, but especially other movies being made, and see how that compares. Because say what you will, this thing made over $2 billion, and that's not nothing. So I don't care if it mostly came from China, it's not nothing. So
I totally agree. And I think the great thing about the animation is that the so many different characters in this movie, because being introduced to so many different looks and personalities and all the different types of motivations, like I really appreciated seeing these characters for the first time along with everybody else and trying to figure out who's good and who's bad, and just the color and visual symbols and symbolism of what you think a good character would be actually ends up being bad character. Like our main villain was all dressed in white. His whole clan and loyal followers were all like robed in white, and you think that they're like good and pure and all that. No, they are very much the very opposite. And then we had these like two chameleon like characters who are like the smallest kind of slapstick comedic duo in charge of like holding this entire shield for the entire city. I'm like, you're putting that responsibility on these two characters. So just like seeing all these different types of characters blend into this world, I thought that was really fun to watch, and just to see the different aspects and just different looks that they really got to play with in this movie.
right on, Demetri. What about any response to the characters and all that? Because that's a good point. We
Well,
haven't.
I mean, again, there's so many characters, but yet each character, again, it was just the way they were, let's say, drawn, portrayed, the colors that were used. I mean, you had a character that was a warlord, and he looked like a villain. And in a sense, he kind of was. I mean, because he took over this land, but he ends up, you understand, not that you understand his motivation, but he ends up having a better heart than you might think. But he was dressed in kind of black, looked like a villain. And to Marissa's point, our character that becomes the villain looked like a sage, wise, old man who would be a mentor, and he would consider him like a sensei, because he was training our character to, he had to get this elixir. And, when it turns on us and it defies our expectations, and again, I don't know if that's just an American audience viewing this. I don't know. Like in China, they may know. I don't know if they had known that character was the villain all along. For me, it was a twist because I didn't expect it. But I don't know that the character, in whatever mythology that character may have, if people already knew that he was a villain, that he was not a good person. For me, it just worked because I didn't see it coming, and the expectations I had in the character, maybe I'm talking about it from a stereotypical perspective. It's what I think that this character was, but he was portrayed as being the master, and they had to go to this person in order for this person to train them, or to train Ne Zha. But I'm very curious to know what that character's legitimate lore is.
Yeah, I definitely, unfortunately, cannot answer that. But it seemed like, it seemed like a twist, right? That was laid in that no matter what, it was supposed to evoke a certain reaction, right? And at least in world, certainly the parents and everyone else, even the student of, I'll call him Man Baby, ultimately was shocked that this was the route, that he was ultimately the villain. Since the movie's called Ne Zha, I want to talk about Ne Zha because it is very interesting that your main character, and they comment on it very directly, looks like a raccoon, and it's like, are you okay? Like, you look like crap. And it's just funny to me that like they just kept making fun of it, and he responds to it at some point of like, why does everyone think that I look like crap? Like I'm just me. But
I think the thing is like I again, I think those were lines that were catered for the children. It was like, we can understand like the animalistic, cartoonish side of a young, what seemingly a young boy who's just kind of thrown in the mix of all of this. And where me being a new viewer to this movie, I was like, he's supposed to not live past 3. He's stuck in the small body. This is basically a man stuck in a small 3-year-old body. So like I was trying to wrap my head around that, but I love that the fact that they had a lot of physicality jokes in it, especially when he changed into Aobang, and they or Aobing, sorry, and then when he was like that persona, they're like, you look different, so like at least they're aware of what the characters are supposed to look like, and that there is a distinct, definitive delineation between this person and this person. You're not just supposed to look like this. AO being is supposed to look like this, and I think there was enough jokes to understand that there's a difference, and it was still made it funny without hitting it too over our heads.
Mm-hmm.
And are we not talking about the fact that Ne Zha is technically a demon? I mean, these are 2 orbs. Right, one is blue. I took it to be like water, and Ne Zha is red. And Ne Zha, it's he's the demon. So we have the light and the dark. It's not too much different from from people who watch from the mythology of like Star Wars, where you have the light and the dark, good and evil. And Ne Zha is a demon. And I said this earlier, it kind of, our preconceived notion of what a demon or something demonic is, Ne Zha is from a demon world, but certain, I guess, American definitions of demon, don't necessarily apply to Ne Zha, because he is fighting on the side of good and trying to stamp out that evil. And when he's working together with his best bud, that isn't something that we would consider as demonic. Yet they seem to be almost symbiotic, that they do rely on each other to live and to fight the good fight. So it does change a bit, at least for me, it changed the perception of, again, how another culture may view a demon, as opposed to what our culture, when we look at it, it's usually something of horror or a supernatural kind of a thing. And I'm talking like the supernatural show where there are demons that they have to fight because they're bad. I don't look at Ne Zha being necessarily evil.
Yeah.
So there are lots of shades of gray.
I think it's interesting. Marissa and I recently read a book called The House on the Cerulean Sea, or by the Cerulean, something.
House in the Cerulean Sea.
And that it is akin to this in the sense that there were creatures that historically in literature are meant to be bad and stuff like that. And so this becomes very much a nurture versus nature sort of an argument, right? And that's kind of what Ne Zha is going through. Like, yes, he's meant to have been born very evil and destructive, but through the love of his parents, he is able to get that. And I mean, that was a very emotional scene. I don't know about for you guys, but when Ne Zha, like, the love of his parents and like his mom just breaking through, and she's like, no, I don't care what happens to me. I want to hug you. And the memories of them growing up together, her raising him and stuff like that. And that's what essentially fuels him to go Super Saiyan at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely the biggest emotional beat in this movie, and especially prefacing it with the scene where he's in young Ne Zha's in front of the entire community, and the mom wants to hug him, and he refuses. That's like your typical teenage moment, and not wanting to be embarrassed by your parents. And then as she's running after him, and he's flying away. I was like, oh, he's gonna regret that so hard. It's like, yeah, hug your parents, people. Call your parents if you haven't talked to them, and tell them how much you love them. Because having that small moment made this scene hit emotionally more. It was way more impactful than it should have been. And literally the slow. I wouldn't say burn, the slow deterioration of the body, like literally disappearing and dissipating in front of us, just made it all the more painful watching it in real time. Like, he's watching his mother fade away from him, and that hits so hard. It's like all you want to do is a quote unquote simple hug, and yet you physically now aren't even able to do it. When you could have done it for 2 seconds earlier in the movie, I was like, oh man, they're really playing with our emotions. And again, that's the universal theme of love and family, and just like just the importance of it, needing that in your life, and what you would do for love and affection and physicality of embracing the people who care about you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I definitely think it says something. It's a mother's love too, and the mother will sacrifice herself to show the love to, in this case, it's a son. So, yeah, I mean, you're both right, and 100% agreement that that's the emotional center of the film. It's Ne Zha's relationship with his mother, father, and such, but the mother especially, who's like, that's okay, son. I am willing to endure the pain to help you so that you will not suffer anymore. I will try to take that pain from you. So, yeah, I mean, it's a very emotional scene, very impactful. And again, it's one of those things that, again, there's so much going on in this movie where, as much as I was having a hard time understanding and piecing certain things together, scenes like that, I think, are universal. Everybody can understand it. And that's where the movie can rein it in and hones it in, where it can become universally accepted. Because a mother's love to that extent, goes across all cultures. Even our animal kingdom, is of such. So, yeah, and that, I guess, I was thankful for, because, like I said, for as much where I was confused, there are certain aspects of the narrative that there's no confusing what's happening here. So,
yeah,
it's a great scene.
Absolutely, and that's what led to the end, and everyone kind of came together, and certainly what fueled Ne Zha to do what he needed to do, right? As you said, Marissa, that initial scene really did change him, right? He realized the error of his ways of, like, these are people who actually do love me, and I've taken that for granted. He was giving a second chance because he did think they died in the middle of the movie, right? And he had that form of regret, and now here was his ability to sort of atone for it, and say all the things that he wished he would have said, and stuff like that. So it was really wonderful. And I do want to shift gears into the reception and box office side of this, because as of right now, it has about a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. They praise it, like us, visuals, humor, emotional beats, and critiqued the chaotic storytelling and slightly long runtime. But there's no denying that there's energy on screen and whatnot. But since Demetri is our resident box office nerd, said endearingly, let me kick it to you for sort of what you can sort of glean from all of this success, especially since most of it does come from China, and we've made hints at it, but I want to give you the floor about the box office side of this.
Well, the box office side, I remember after watching the movie, you and I had a conversation. I was curious about knowing what it had made total, which is about, thus far, let's say 2.2 billion, we'll round up. I'm seeing that it's 2.150. I'll just round up. Why not give it to it? But I was curious to know what territories outside of the U.S. In U.S., I don't think 22 million is necessarily a bad thing. And a lot of that 22 million had to have come from the box office gross before it became American dubbed, right? It had to, because, I know that with this re-release in the American dub, it didn't do so well. So the 22 million is when it came out. Initially here in the States, where, like you, Phil, people had to read it. It was subtitled. But in China, the movie did open up, I see January 29th in 2025, and thus far 1.8, let's call it 9, because it's 1862, $1.9 billion in China. That's a lot of repeat viewing, is the way that I see it. And that's a cross-culture, that's like over here we would call it definitely a 4-quadrant movie. But I also noticed that it opened up in Russia, New Zealand, Australia, Hong Kong, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, Spain, Germany, and the United Kingdom. All of those territories in the United Kingdom, it was over $1.5 million, and then Australia, close to $1.5 million. So outside of China, Australia and the United Kingdom had the second and third highest gross in all of our territories. But obviously, I'm sorry, and I was looking at the opening gross. Here's where Hong Kong, I was wrong. Hong Kong, it did $7 million in Hong Kong, okay? So in Australia, $4 million. So Hong Kong comes in at number 2. Australia comes in number 3. That's crazy to me. Australia, really big on this movie. And then the United Kingdom does $1.5 million all in for its gross. So obviously in all these other countries, they appreciated this movie for its unique style, its storytelling, its narrative. So that's why I don't think 22 million here is that bad. And again, a majority of that had to come when it was subtitled. So I think there is no denying that anime as a whole, whether it's from China, Japanese, I think it's in a boon right now. There's always been a popularity with anime, but I think now more than ever, I think it's as big, and I think it's only growing.
I wouldn't call it, this would not be categorized as anime, like for the anime fans. So I just want to make that distinction so we don't get hate mail.
Well,
death threats. People take that very seriously.
Okay, understood. But this,
but I get what you're saying. Like, there's a high quality animation.
That is really in a, I think it's not a renaissance. It's always been there. There's always been a love for this form of storytelling, right? Now it's getting really huge. And I think when you have a movie that comes out and it does over $2 billion, that says something about people's appreciation for this art form and for this narrative. And I think it will only grow. I said earlier that I had a couple of movies to compare it to. I know I talked about Zootopia, but I think it's also important. To me, I was thinking about one movie, the domestic movie, I was thinking about was Minecraft. Minecraft here was huge, but it was also huge. It was also huge box office wise from a domestic standpoint as well. And again, I tried to sit through Minecraft. I didn't get it. And that's when I officially said, a lot of pop culture, I'm just not getting this movie. But It really hit big here. It hit huge from foreign territories. I was actually surprised as to how big it played, and that's somewhat of an animation, and I know it's based off of a game. But then another movie that really struck me, it's a live action movie, it's a foreign film, is the movie RRR. Okay, RRR from India did really big, $151 million international, won the Academy Award for Best Original Song, $166 million worldwide, and it did $15 million here in the States, and it never got the release that Ne Zha 2 has gotten, but yet from a cultural standpoint, it was really big around the world. It superseded just being a Telugu movie or movie released in India. It was huge. It was well-liked. And it came here in the States. It was, like I said, it was never had that full wide release. But I can tell you the times that I watched that movie here, every time I saw it, it was always sold out, pre-sold out. And it was a movie-going experience unlike I've still ever had. Prior to seeing it and after seeing it, it was a movie-going experience unlike any other I've ever had going to see a movie in the big screen. So RRR, also a foreign film that really just had a cultural impact around the world. And I look at Ne Zha 2, and obviously there's a huge cultural impact around the world for it to make this kind of money in China too. And it just makes me curious. How was it marketed? How was it how wide was it released? And how did people consume it? Was it kids? Was it this cross-section? And how many multiple viewings was there of this movie? When we can look at a movie like a Minecraft that we know that the kids saw multiple times, it was reported on, and I look at this, Ne Zha 2, going, wow, the highest grossing movie of the year thus far, that's crazy to me. And it's also the power of movies, I believe, that you can't get, like we're talking about Ne Zha 2, and when you release and you're that big, that's what puts it into the pop culture to an extent. And then it makes me wonder, in China, is it streaming yet? Is it still in theaters? Like, how do they perpetuate this so that the gross can be as big as it is? And then when you factor in places like Australia, which is huge to me, again, to me, it's the pop culture of movies as opposed to other ways of seeing things. And we talk about here in the media, they talk about how YouTube gets all these views and things, but they don't generate $2 billion. So that to me is quite fantastic that a movie like this just resonates with so many countries around the world in a very positive way. What did you say? It was 92% Rotten Tomatoes, you said?
Yeah, 92. So,
that's crazy to me.
It is. And as we round things out, like when we look at the box office of, let's say roughly 20 million within the US, we're comparing that as not the best, because we look at just our own box office, right? Looking at like a Pixar and stuff like that. But then also we look at a comparison to the 2.2 billion number. But the crazy part is, again, production-wise, this cost around $80 million. So not terrible to get $20 million in a different territory. So there's that side of it. And yeah, just in terms of my final thoughts, I do see this as a big shift. Like Japan with anime and stuff like that. Like I think Demon Slayer, just already what's happening as far as pre-sale tickets and whatnot for that movie coming out soon is insane. So you're correct in the sense that anime has always been big, but I think now it's becoming like truly mainstream, and especially as Gen Z enters into full adulthood, like we're going to really see a shift there. And I think as far as for me, I think this is an announcement from China how great their animation sector is, because they generally love high quality 3D animation made for 30 to 50 million dollars, right? This is like obviously a little bit more expensive given the grandeur and all that, but that tends to be their wheelhouse, at least from my research through the American film market and stuff like that. So I think we're
Do you
going
know
to.
how much the first one cost, Phil? Sorry to interrupt, but I'm just curious. Do you know how much the first one cost? Like, did they double the production budget for this? Was it
I
around
think that one
40 or
may have
50?
been 50 to 60 is what I'm going to guess as far as
Okay.
the first one. Because again, like I'm just using it as a comp, knowing like what these films cost, and it is funny. Like there's a cultural aspect to it because China does not like hand drawn animated movies. They just don't. They like 3D. Conversely, Japan, they don't like Pixar movies. They just don't. So it is very interesting to understand people's sensibilities. But I do like the sort of opening up of the floodgates. You mentioned RRR and stuff like that. I want to see more cinema from the world, right? And for all of us to uplift the global film industry, right? I think having something succeed in China and then cross over here and stuff like that and stuff like, I think that's amazing. No different than I remember when Godzilla -1 came out. That was an amazing movie, and there's so many foreign movies that I absolutely love. So I think this signals we're going to get a lot more. Hopefully, see a lot more. And yeah, I think this movie will start kind of, pardon the metaphor of it all, but the tsunami of stuff like Ne Zha now is on Netflix, which wasn't before. So where this movie, I imagine this one will also end up on Netflix in due time. But that's my final thoughts. I think this marks just a big cultural shift that we can't even anticipate what's going to happen. Marissa, I kick it to you for your final thoughts.
I really, really went into this movie blind, and I came out of it really loving it. Like I do appreciate a good art. I can understand why it got lost on some certain cultures and stuff and countries, because like this is and I like it could be considered a very visually overstimulating film, because it really is. I mean, it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous to look at. But like I said before, it's like if you blink, you're going to miss 30 amazing shots. And going back and forth from subtitles to the visuals, like this movie requires repeat visual viewings. So and I think that if people have the opportunity to see this in theaters, do it, because it will not translate as well on a home screen on Netflix than it would in a theater. So I say just
Or
take
your
the
iPhone.
opportunity and watch this in the big, just take the opportunity to watch this on the proper platform that it's supposed to be viewed at. Overall, I do actually want to see this movie again. I plan on seeing it once I fit it into my schedule, because it is a long film too. But you have to appreciate it. All the love and hard work and animation and universal stories and themes that went into it. It's a great movie that I think everybody should see.
Demetri, your final thoughts.
Yeah, again, I just wanted to go back to Minecraft. Minecraft here made over 423 million domestic. Okay, from a global standpoint, 955 million. So that's almost $1 billion domestic. I mean, globally. So that's pretty big when you think about how cultures can trade off and how it can expand and how a game can play universally, and it's somewhat animated. That's why I brought up Minecraft from us. Look, to watch this on an iPad or an iPhone would be a travesty. I love to be able to look through this window, as I said it before, into how others view animation. And I just wonder, too, do people at Disney, DreamWorks, Pixar, Disney, do they look at a movie like this and say, how can we try to do that here? How do we make something look that amazing here? And will they take the swing to try to be original rather than IP focused? And that's another thing. The first movie, at least to my knowledge, isn't necessarily IP focused, right? And I don't know how much the first movie did, but I would have heard about it if it made about 800. This one does 2 billion, and I scratch my head going, what about it? How did it hit? What about it made people go? I mean, obviously it was beloved, but did it have did something similar happen in China that happens here a lot? Meaning, a movie can come out and do okay in the box office, right? And then it hits its ancillary markets, and that's where a lot of people may find it. So if a sequel is to be made, that sequel ends up being huge, right? This has happened here in the States many times with a lot of movies. It just makes me wonder, does something similar happen abroad? Does Ne Zha come out, it does really well, and then the ancillary markets hit for whatever they may be in China? I don't know how that necessarily works. Do people appreciate it? And then when they make a sequel, people go, oh yeah, that first one, I didn't see it at the theaters, I saw it on video or streaming, whatever it may be. And they just go in droves to see the sequel because they love the first one so much. Now, I can only anticipate that the third one, people are waiting with high anticipation to go for a third movie. And Lord knows, did the same post-credits or during the credits, was that an American thing that was tacked on, or was that in the version you saw?
That was always there.
Say that again?
That was always there.
I'm sorry?
That was always
there. It was always there. So, but then then it makes me wonder, A24. This isn't necessarily A24's wheelhouse. And to be quite honest, I have to say, A24 kind of failed this movie when they did this American re-release. I mean, the news got out, but they didn't really do much in the sake of marketing this movie at all. And it makes me wonder what A24's, what their goal is. Why did they do this unless they have those ancillary rights to release it domestically, and they feel that they'll reap the benefits of that? Because A24 had nothing to do with the original release, correct?
No.
Phil? It wasn't, right. So it's just this dub, this American dub, but they didn't do anything to market it. So were they just going on the laurels of it being a success, figuring people are going to see it? I don't know what their deal was. And I don't know if they make money off of selling it on Blu-ray or selling it on streaming. And maybe they have rights for merchandising. I have no idea. Because they sure as heck did not market this movie as A24 markets a lot of their other movies. And I think you would agree with that. A lot of people, I don't think, knew this movie was coming out. Yeah. So in this format, to go see it. And it's not your typical, it's not what I would consider an A24's wheelhouse to release. So I think that they kind of dropped the ball if they were looking for bigger box office, because they didn't do anything. It's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. So, I mean, as far as all of that, we'll have to kind of wait and see. Maybe someday we'll shed the light on that. I'm not sure. They might keep it close to the vest, but definitely a movie that just demands attention. To your point, I do hope that Americans, I think they should be paying attention. I also hope that they pay attention to the right stuff as opposed to treat your workers badly in order to get a result, right? I think Hollywood tends to take the wrong messages from success stories, unfortunately. But there was one thing that I was going to comment on in terms of what you said, Marisa, but I forget, so I'm going to drop it. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to tune in. We truly appreciate it. Comment down below. Let us know what you thought of the movie. If you want to talk spoilers, by all means. Obviously, we've talked spoilers, but just a note as such for other people as a common courtesy, so that way they're not spoiled. In the meantime, at Serafini TV is where you can interact with Marisa. At Demetri Panos, correct, on social media for you.
Social media for me, check me out on the Cinescope and also KDM. I'm also look, if people are going to comment on this, I want to know where they saw the movie, like meaning what country did you see this from, and I want to know, did you see a subtitled version? Did you see the most recent American A24 version? And how long ago did you see it? Maybe you're watching us in China. I want to know when you saw it. I want to know what the impact was on you, the moviegoer. I'm very curious because it's how I think that we can learn. When I reviewed RRR, I got a lot of people from India commenting on how big it was and how happy they were that it made it here to the States and that it was such a cultural phenomenon. I want to know how it was a cultural phenomenon for other people, and if people are viewing this internationally.
Perfect. Exactly. Agreed. So thank you as always. And even though this was the one last time, we'll see you.
Let's not make it the last time. It's good to see you, Marisa. It's good to see you, Phil.
Always good to see you, Dimitri.
Bye, everyone.